it's a strange theory. They are pushing this idea that voter suppression isn't Republicans trying to stop black people from voting, but that it is Democrats trying to stop third parties that are financed by Republicans from being able to compete against them. That is voter suppression. And so the genesis of this is conservative groups have gotten behind this no labels. You probably heard a little bit about them. They were started by Bloomberg about a decade ago, and the idea is running third-party candidates in races, including the presidential race. I actually agree with that. I think we need 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parties in America. There's no reason that Lauren Boebert and Mitt Romney belong in the same political party. We're going to talk more about Lauren Boebert later. But now No Labels is being chaired by Republican Governor Larry Hogan, co-chaired by former vice presidential nominee Senator Joe Lieberman, who was going to be John McCain's running mate in 2008 until the party made him take Sarah Palin, being funded by major Republican donors. And the idea this election cycle is to get them on the ballot in as many states as possible, hopefully to siphon votes away from Democrats, not just on the presidential level, but on the Senate level, on the House level, etc. And they're hoping that in a tight race, they can skim off 1, 2, 3% of the vote and swing the election to Republicans. What they say happened with Jill Stein and the Green Party to Hillary back in 2016. And so now Mick Mulvaney published this article, and they've been running around doing these talking points claiming that Democrats want to suppress the vote because they don't want to allow these third-party groups that are financed by Republicans and headed up by Republicans to be able to run in Democratic primaries. But what they forget is we are now wise to their schemes. We now understand what they're doing. We saw them do this with critical race theory, where you take something which is a doctrinal field of study that nobody is talking about, and you turn it into the new evil, that this is the thing we have to fight against. We saw this with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Well, now they are going around trying to stop diversity, equity, and inclusion in corporations and in schools because they're saying that by pushing diversity, by saying you have to include black people, well, now that is discriminatory against white people, and that's the real discrimination. We see them doing this right now with school curriculums around the country. We see them doing this with affirmative action programs, saying that affirmative action is actually reverse racism, reverse discrimination against white people and Asian people. And now they're doing it with voter suppression. And it's our jobs, now that we know what the playbook is, to get out in front of it. We cannot simply allow them to continue to dominate these conversations and use their definitions as opposed to fixing the actual problem. They took something like defund the police, which was never really a thing. I don't think any of y'all heard about defund the police at the same time everybody else heard about defund the police, when conservatives decided that that would be the new evil thing. And the idea is, well, maybe we don't need to send somebody with a gun, a stick, pepper spray, handcuffs, and a badge if somebody's having a mental health emergency. Maybe you should send a mental health professional if somebody has an addiction episode. Instead of beating them with a stick, maybe you send an addiction expert instead. And that you, by reimagining and reallocating resources in such a way that we can have better policing, well, then police can concentrate on their core job of stopping violent crime and ensuring domestic tranquility. Well, that sounds like a good idea. I think most people agree with that. Republicans took that and said they're trying to defund the police, get rid of all police, and turn this into some kind of liberal, communist, Marxist state. And dumb people believe that. Because remember, most of the people in this country are dumb. They count on that. It's baked in to the ethos of America. There's a reason our public education system is the way that it is. They have to keep a certain amount of the population as dumb as possible, because otherwise, who's going to eat all those McDonald's hamburgers? Who's going to watch all these TV shows if you allow these people to have any level of education? And so we have this conversation with Mick Mulvaney, the former White House chief of staff, and even he, because one of the things that I love that the producers did, they did not tell either of us that it was a debate segment. So I came on just thinking I was responding to the article that Mick Mulvaney had written. Mick Mulvaney came on thinking he was just going to talk about the article, and then magic just happens on live television. But it's crucial for us to fight back against every effort of this nature, because if we do not, and we do not use our voices, our media apparatuses, our strength as a community, by the time they're done, they will change the definition of everything that exists in this country. We'll be watching in 2050 the autobiography of Malcolm X, starring Brad Pitt. We're going to watch Roots, the musical, with Selena Gomez and Justin Bieber. They will change every part of history. They will rewrite any part of history. They will rewrite history to the point where you are the bad guys and they were the good guys. Think about the way they taught you cowboys and Indians. These poor settlers moving out west to this wild territory, getting raided by these savage Indians. And it took John Wayne to ride into town. That's the only thing that could civilize the West. That's what they taught you. Then as you grow up and get information and learn, you find out just peaceful people living in their communities they lived in for thousands of years. White settlers moved in and wiped them out with disease and war. They lied to them. They signed treaties that weren't worth anything, weren't worth the paper they were written on. They stole their land, raped their women, enslaved their children, destroyed their holy places. But by the time they're done with it, it'll be John Wayne riding in to save the day. The same thing they're trying to do with black folks, the same thing they're trying to do with black history. When we talk about many of the aspects of the civil rights movement, of the fight against slavery, of the capture and the enslavement and imprisonment of black people, we only have their narrative to go off of. And because of that, we have an entire generation, an entire group in the black community that hates black people more than they hate the people who enslave black people, who believe the propaganda they are taught, who believe the lies they have been exposed to, and who have no ability to fight back against it. So this is why it's important for us to stand up. This is why it's important for us to fight. This is why it's crucial for us never to back down, never to take an inch back, not to take a centimeter back at the end of the day. Because once you do, they will change and degrade that narrative. We're already seeing it with Dr. King, where they've taken every part of Dr. King and summarized him down into content of the character, not the color of the skin. That's the only thing Dr. King ever said, according to them, including in that same speech. That's the only thing that he said. And now they are using that argument against affirmative action. They're using that argument against police reform. They're using that argument against diversity in corporations. They're using that argument against integrating higher educational facilities and equal pay for African Americans and criminal justice reform. It's all about controlling his story, not about telling you his story. And the reason they do this is because if they can control the past, they can control the future. So it's our job in the present to make our voices heard and make sure that truth and reality is taught to our progeny. We're going to talk more about this after the break. Call in 404-726-1380, News and Talk 1380 WAOK.